Most people don't like performance reviews and strongly feel dissatisfied with their performance review outcomes. I have always been of the view it's best to take this into our hands and manage upward. My best tip is always to think about your own impact you've had on yourself as your own personal learning, and impact you've had on others, work and projects you have had as part of your roles. My name is Sanya. I work as a strategic HR business partner. I live and work in England. I actually landed a new role in June this year, which means I have been in my current role for the last 6 months. Now, I have already passed my probation period, which means I'm doing pretty okay. Nevertheless, I still have a performance review meeting like everyone else does, and I'm really keen to prepare for that meeting. I have reflected quite a lot as to how I would really like to perform, what I would like to do, and really see whether I can influence some of the objectives I'm going to get in 2023. I have created a Notion template, which I will share with you for free, so you can download it from my digital store. There is a link you will get and simply duplicate to your Notion workspace. This template will help you prepare for similar meetings with your managers, regardless of the role and organization you work for, because it's pretty general. Now, let's go through this Notion template together and the steps we're going to go through. As you can see on your screens, there are 3 steps. Step 1 is all about reflecting. Step 2 is all about planning, discussing and agreeing. And step 3 is all about executing, or as I like to call it, manage and present yourself like a pro. In the step 1, it's quite important to list all of the key objectives we have discussed and agreed with our managers. If you haven't agreed any objectives, sometimes it does happen you simply start in a new role and you haven't set those specific or smart objectives with your managers. You simply hit the ground running and started working straight away. I would encourage you to simply list all of the things you ended up doing and try and group them together into no more than 5 objectives. Then we have unplanned objectives. It's very common that you start in your new role, you have agreed your objectives, and then all of a sudden you start to do other pieces of work, start to collaborate, start to help others, or your manager simply asks you to do something else. So it's quite important to list all of those objectives you didn't plan for, but you ended up doing. List where you collaborated on someone else's objectives, because that's quite important to understand how you together worked with other people. And collaboration is actually quite important because it does come up very often as a question in job interviews. Then we proceed with listing our key achievements. So list the things you have achieved and proud of. You may use these as examples in your job interviews. List all of the obstacles and challenges you experienced and how you overcame or managed them. Now, feedback section. So we need to list people we asked for feedback and key themes we have got as a result of this feedback. Asking for feedback and digesting it doesn't come easy for many people. However, I would encourage you to take it all objectively rather than subjectively. I tend to ask a number of people I worked with them on a piece of work, and I really try to make it as specific as possible as opposed to a general feedback. So I make it specific that focuses on the work rather than me as a person, to make it less intimidating for myself and also for them. It's much easier to give some feedback to a person you worked with if it's focused on that particular piece of work. And let's just be honest, we simply know when our performance is doing really well and when we are going over and above and when we simply are slacking a little bit and really don't do as much. We know ourselves when our performance is fantastic and when our performance is not as great. In terms of the suggestion as to how to ask for feedback, now I have seen so many suggested templates and drafts that we can use to approach someone and ask them for feedback. A typical example is, could you please give me your feedback as to what are the top 3 things I need to start doing, stop doing, continue doing. I personally don't like this way of asking for feedback because it's quite subjective, it's not really specific, and someone needs to give you feedback on the way you are as a person and the way you work. It's pretty much difficult for that person to give you some feedback and also for you to ask. I really try to make it as specific as possible. So if you look at in the template, I have left for you a draft email that you can tweak and adapt further to suit your wording wording and situation. I would simply say, I'm preparing for a performance review meeting with my manager, and then I would mention who they are because some people may not know who my manager is. We worked together on X project for the last 6 months. I'm keen to understand how it all went from your perspective, your lessons learned, my role and remit, and how I contributed to the successful delivery of the project. I'm keen to understand what went well and what didn't go so well. Could you please share up to 3 things or tips for me to be mindful of if we end up working together again and support the project? I would be grateful if you could send me your feedback by certain date. We can always have a meeting if that is easier for you. I look forward to hearing from you. It's something along these lines that work really well. The next one is about asking your manager for feedback and their observations, how you are getting on. So how you work with the team, and it's also important to be open to receive this and ask and listen. Some of the best people I have worked with manage this really well. Try not to take it personally and see it as an opportunity to adapt and learn how to work with various styles and expectations. The next one is about people and tools. So we need to list people and tools that helped you achieve your objectives. List tools, toolkits, templates you created which helped you in your role, and if others are using them as well, because that helps with your team contributions and how you help others perform well in their roles. List your go-to coaches, mentors, peers you work closely with who help you with your work. The next part is about what happened this year. So think about your planned and unplanned work. Discuss how unplanned work came about and how you got involved in this unplanned work. Timeline of activities, key activities only. So I would simply list each month as to what happened each month as a key activity. In terms of challenges, I would list all the challenges I have encountered as a result of all of my pieces of work and projects I worked on, and how I actually managed to deal with those challenges. And final element is around opportunities. So I would list all of the opportunities I've had. Perhaps you could list as to who you worked with, who you learned from, how you managed to do something new, or you created something new, you added value to something else, how you contributed to overall project or someone else's project. The next section is about things I've learned this year. So for me, it's always about learning from other people. Think again about those collaborations, team working, networking, listing names, people who helped you. I would also list tools and toolkits I have learned from, articles and blogs that really have helped me, that I have found very insightful and often referred to in my work as well. Podcasts as well. There are so many podcasts these days that we can learn from and that can help us really manage ourselves and our work better and always continuously seek to improve ourselves and our work. Books as well. I often talk about books as mentors on demand because it's also linked to your CPD or continuous professional development. The next section is about questions to ask myself before I speak to my manager. I have added lots of questions here for you to see, reflect on, and simply click on this black arrow, which is called a toggle, to get a drop-down list, and you can simply start answering some of these questions. They are really good questions to get you thinking. Some of these questions may not come up on the day, your manager may not ask them, which is irrelevant. It's really for you to understand how you would answer some of these questions, and you can always tweak them and change them and add your own ones. Step 2 is about planning, discussing, and agreeing. The next section in step 2 is about support I will need to be successful in my role. I really want to go into understanding what are my core objectives and can I just do them on my own, and will I need a bit more support to ensure I'm successful, and what are my stretch objectives. Stretch objectives are where I personally want to go over and above a bit more than I really need to because I'm keen to learn, and maybe it's an opportunity to actually demonstrate as to how I like to work and think and create. And I would also review my career aspirations and goals in the long term. Even if it's vague at the time I speak to our manager, I really like to have a number of options as to where I see myself and reserve the right to change my opinion down the line if I stay in that organization. Now, the next section is about what I want to do and learn. Think about a 70-20-10 learning model, which you may have seen and come across. I have worked with 70-20-10 learning models in various organizations, and this is another approach and another way as to how you can actually approach coach drafting your objectives and your own personal development plan. So 70% is learning on the job, and think about those activities and impact you seek to achieve when you are actually learning on the job. 20% is learning through others and through other roles. Often it could be acting up, or it could be you apply for a secondment, which means you do another role on a temporary basis, or you do some shadowing. But it's all about learning through others. Think about your coaches, your mentors as well. And 10% of this learning model is all about courses and formal training. So for example, it could be, I want to complete a project management qualification. Think of this as your career or work bucket list. So an example could be, I would like to manage a team, so therefore I would welcome an opportunity to act up if someone is, let's say, off sick for a long time who's managing a team, or to get a secondment, which is a temporary role in my current organization where I can manage a team on a temporary basis. Next one could be, I would like to create a framework or a plan or approach that's used by many in my organization or a team. I would like to become a mentor. I would like to become a coach. I would like to get a project management qualification, and this list goes on. The next section is about your actual objectives for the new year. So once we've gone through reflecting, once we've gone through our wish list, we now have an opportunity to actually agree our objectives, our core objectives and our stretch objectives. The number one tip is that they have to be SMART objectives. So they have to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, which I'm sure many of you have heard. There are so many reports and research out there that number one contributor to employees' performance is actually lack of clarity. So if you don't have that clarity, seek the clarity until you get it. Step 3 is about executing and managing and presenting yourself like a pro. I suspect most organizations have performance management systems and frameworks in place. That's also something you need to take into account and use in your roles and your organizations. If you don't have a specific system and you work for an organization that doesn't have that performance management system in place, you can actually use this as a tracker. You have your objectives and they become your to-do list, if you like. You can move them when they are in progress, when you start working on those, and you can also move them across when you complete them. And I find as a visual, they actually work as a project management tool. It's really great. And when you click on it, it really opens a new window where you can record your objective and how you're progressing against this objective. You can attach any documents, any information, any emails as well at the same time. This is pretty much like a project management tool. So that's your action tracker. And if you click on timeline, in here actually you can create a timeline for yourself as to when you need to start certain activities and when you need to do them by, all presented in a really nice and professional way, which I absolutely love. As I was preparing for this video, I asked you to comment and ask me any questions you have about my own personal performance preparations or how it's actually done and how I approach it. Gabriel was kind enough to send me his questions. He asked me 3 very specific questions. How's your performance measured? Do you have any KPIs you work towards and also a project deadline? And how do you proceed if at some point your manager expectations towards your work haven't been met? So how is my performance measured? This is actually determined by the performance management framework I work with, and every organization manages this very differently. So as I change my roles and my organizations, the first thing I really want to understand is how is performance managed in that organization? And that is pretty much how it's determined as to how my performance is going to be measured. You usually have to complete self-assessment first. So in a performance management framework, the whole process looks like you have to complete your self-assessment first. You have to have a meeting with your manager. They then have to rate you and provide the relevant rating and narrative and feedback. And that pretty much closes the loop. And then you set up new objectives for the new year. The next question is, do you have any KPIs you work towards and also project deadlines? I do actually work on work packages and projects. I work with a project management system called Jira. So it's really open and transparent as to what I'm working on every month and what I need to achieve every month, which overall contribute to my annual objectives. And the last question is, how do you proceed if at some point your manager expectations towards your work haven't been met? I would simply recontract with my manager, or I would renegotiate or realign as to what I need to do. The bottom line is, you may agree your 5 objectives you need to work on for a a particular year. Things change and businesses change, objectives change, and it's really important as they change that you have those meetings and conversations and agree new ones and start with those new ones. So that's something I would do, and because I have regular meetings with my manager, I feel I have an opportunity to talk about those changes on a regular basis. That's it for this video. Let me know how you are preparing for your performance reviews. If you have liked this video, there are many other similar ones on my channel, and I'm happy to answer any other questions you have. Bye for now.